Yeah, these are notes, because we haven't done these types of problems yet. So the first step is going to be the same as the past couple days, where the first thing you do is you take the constant and you move it to the other side. So it starts off the same. And then the second step is where it changes, but it only changes a little bit. So when we do the completing the square process, we have to have the squared term alone. It can't have a coefficient. So having the coefficient in the problem is what makes this a little bit different from yesterday. So we're going to take out, it's kind of like the GCF, but not quite, because we're not taking a GCF out with the variable. We're only taking a GCF out with the number, with the coefficient. So I'm going to take out the 4, and that's going to leave me with n squared minus 2n. And then I'm going to do the part where I say plus blank. And then I have the number on the other side. And then from here, I kind of feel like I'm doing the problem like normal for a second. So I'm going to take the middle term, and what do I do with it? Divide by 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. And then negative 1 squared is 1. And so 1 is the number that completes the square. But I didn't really add 1 to the left side of the equation. I actually did 4 multiplied by 1, because there's a 4 that's factored out. So if I have 4 times 1 on the left side of the equation, what is that? 4 times 1. 4. So that means I actually added 4 to the left side of the equation. So what should I add to the right side of the equation to keep it balanced? I should add 4 to the right side as well. So that's the main thing that makes this problem different, is that up here I factored out the 4, and that impacted things when I completed the square. So 4 times 1 means that I have to add 4 to the right side of the equation. Okay, so at this point, I have the 4 in the front, I have parentheses squared, and I have that it equals a number on the right side. So what goes in my parentheses? We have x minus 1. The reason we have minus 1 in the parentheses is because that's the number we got when we divided by 2. So whatever we get when we divide by 2, that always ends up in the parentheses. X minus 1. And then on the other side, we have 32 and 4. That makes 36. So now, if we start to solve the equation, we're not going to jump right into square rooting. We have to do something first before we square root. So the 4, I just brought the 4 down from this. And then these parentheses, it should have been an n, sorry. This part always ends up being something in parentheses squared. So this part, we haven't been showing this step. We've been shortcutting it, but if you look for two things that multiply to 1 and add to negative 2, the two numbers would be negative 1 and negative 1, and it always ends up being whatever you got when you divided by 2. So instead of writing out that step every time, we just shortcut it and we just say, oh, whatever I got here when I divided by 2, that's always going to be this. But if you showed your work, this is the work you would show. You would say, oh, if I factored this, whatever multiplies to 1 and adds to negative 2, it would be negative 1 and negative 1, which would give me two sets of parentheses, n minus 1, and that is n minus 1 squared. So that would be like the long way of doing it. But since we know that works every single time, we're just going from here straight to here to save ourselves some steps. Yeah. You would not distribute. You can't because of the squared. You would want to undo the 4 a different way. How could you undo the 4 and move it away from the n? We're going to divide by the 4 instead. Yeah.
So when will we actually use like complete the square? Is this like another way to find x or n?
Yeah, so what we've looked at is when you're solving quadratics, factoring is probably the preferred method because it's fastest. Quadratic formula is another method that's nice because it works in every single situation. And actually completing the square is just like the quadratic formula. It works in every single situation. So, and actually, if I was to give you a problem, and I put an a here, ax squared plus bx plus c, if I did it like that and I didn't give you any numbers and I just put a, b, and c and had it equal 0, if you did completing the square on that, that's actually where the quadratic formula comes from. So if you did this process I'm teaching you today on a problem with no numbers, with only letters, you would get the quadratic formula. So completing the square is one process. Quadratic formula came from completing the square. It's a formula. They both work in every single situation. And the big picture purpose is we're trying to solve quadratics. We like to solve equations. It's nice to be able to get answers. If we were to solve them and look at their graphs, we would be finding x-intercepts. So that's kind of the big picture perspective of what we're doing. Yeah. So if we're trying to solve for n, we would divide by 4. And the reason we're dividing by 4 and not distributing the 4, first of all, we can't distribute the 4 because of the squared. Second of all, we want to simplify the problem more, not complicate it, and distributing the 4 would make it a little bit more complicated with the n rather than simplify it. Yeah. So 36 divided by 4 is what? 9. Okay. So we have n minus 1 squared equals 9, and now what should I do? Now we can square root. And is 9 a perfect square or just a regular number? Perfect square. So when I square root it, what do I get? But not just 3. Plus or minus 3. So a positive 3 and a negative 3. Okay? And then how do I get the n alone? Add the 1. Okay? So n equals plus or minus 3 with a plus 1 on the end. So if I have a positive 3 plus 1, what do I get? 4. And if I have a negative 3 plus 1, negative 2. Okay. So what this tells me is that if I was to look at the original problem and I set it equal to 0, that original problem was factorable. I didn't have to do completing the square to solve it. I could have factored it. Okay, let's try another one. So we're going to do 3a squared minus 18a plus 27 equals 3. Okay, so my first step is the same as yesterday. So what's my first step? Minus the 27 to the other side. Okay, so we're going to move the constant over. So 3a squared minus 18a equals negative 24. Okay. The next step is a little bit different. Can you look at the previous problem and figure out the next step? Take out the 3. Okay. And that leaves us with a squared minus 6a plus blank equals negative 24. Okay. And this is the part that's the same as yesterday. We take the middle term, divide by 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, and we're going to square it. Negative 3 squared is 9, okay? So 9 is the number that completes the square. We're going to put a 9 in here, but it's not really a 9. It's actually 3 times 9, which is actually 27. So we actually added 27 to the left side, which means we should add 27 to the right side. Okay? So now we have 3 times something in parentheses squared equals a number. And what goes in our parentheses squared? A minus 3. So whatever you got when you divided by 2, that goes in your parentheses. And then what goes over here? 3. So negative 24 plus 27, 3. Okay. So our first step in solving is going to be what? Divide by 3. A minus 3 squared is 1. And then square root. And the square root of 1 is, but more than just 1, it's plus or minus 1. And then what should we do? Add the 3. So A equals 4 and 2. Okay, how are we feeling about the differences? Feeling okay? Little. Okay. Let's try. Two r squared. Negative 2r squared. Plus 20r plus 56 equals negative 10. Okay. So what should we do first? Subtract the constant, move it over, okay. I have a few people that I've seen texting, and I shouldn't see anybody texting, so let's put all the cell phones away. We're going to take out the 2, and we're going to take out the negative. So we've got r squared, and then how does taking out a negative 2 change this number?
It has to be a negative 2.
We're going to take a negative 2 out of that, so it's going to change it to a negative 10. So be careful of having, whenever you have a negative in there, that's where I see students make the most mistakes.
So what happens if it was negative 2r squared minus 25?
Then you would take,
Would that affect the
and it would make it positive.
so
So taking the negative out just changes the sign. Yeah.
regardless for where it is, it's on the outside?
Okay. So what do we do next?
Divide the 10 by 2.
So negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25. Okay?
Yeah, negative 2 times 25.
Yeah, so we didn't actually add 25. We actually had negative 2 times 25, which is negative 50. Okay? And so the equation that we're working with is what?
Negative 2r minus 5 equals negative 120.
Negative 126?
I want to say 6
Okay. Negative 120. Wait, 116? Is it 116? Okay. Well, this is 11, 11, 11.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, 116. Okay. We're very close. We've got a little thing wrong with this. Anyone see the little thing wrong with this? It needs a squared. Okay, perfect. All right, so what should we do from here? Divide by negative 2. And what does that give us? 58. Okay. And then what should we do? Square root it. Is 58 a perfect square or a regular number? Regular number. So we're going to write what?
R equals plus or minus square root 58.
Okay, so the square root gets to stay in the number. And then we're going to add the 5 on the end. So if we're going with exact answers, we're just going to leave it like this. If we wanted the approximate answer, if we wanted the decimal, we could plug that in and find the decimal. Okay, so let's see if we can do one without me just doing the whole problem for you. So I'm going to put a problem up. This is completing the square. Okay, here's the problem that you're going to do.
So for the very first problem, it was 4x squared minus 8n minus 38 equals 56.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to complete the square way.
So whenever we have a number in the front, that number is going to come out, but we're always going to be dividing by 2 with the middle term.
So yeah, we eventually got to 4 on the outside of the parentheses, and the other by equals -2m, and we didn't put a negative on the outside for the 4. Is that what we're supposed to do?
So the only reason you would put a negative on the outside is because the first term is negative.
Okay, so if the second one is negative,
It doesn't matter what the second one is. It only matters what the first one is. Good question.
Do we have to complete the square away?
Yeah. So do the first couple steps and we'll just make sure that we're all doing it correctly. So see if you can get the first couple steps done. So we're going to move the constant over and take the number in the front out. How do we do on the first couple steps? So we've got the constant moved over. We got the number in the front taken out. We're good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's divide by 2 and square it and figure out what number goes in the blank. Oop, I didn't mean to hit that. Just kidding. Okay, divide by 2 and square it. And figure out what number goes in the blank. But remember, that's not the number that completes the square, or that's not the number that goes on the other side. And then see what number should be added to the other side. I don't want you to see my work before you do your work. And you should not just be adding 4 to the other side. If you're just adding 4, you missed a step. All right, did everyone get this part? -4 divided by 2 is -2. -2 squared is 4, so 4 goes in the blank. But you didn't really add 4. You really added 6 times 4. So you really added 24 to the left side, which means we got to add 24 to the right side. So now we got to figure out how to write our equation. Go ahead and see if you can write your equation, plugging all the numbers in.
n equals plus or minus square root of 1 minus 2.
I haven't gone that far yet. Is this what we got for our equation? Yes? 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 Okay. And then go ahead and start solving your equation. I'm thinking it's not going to give us a perfect square. No? Okay. Is that what you guys got also? Yeah? This makes me cringe a little bit inside because we really shouldn't do decimals inside of square roots, but I'm going to leave it there because it would be overly complicated. Yes? Yeah. Not die, because the dead babies is for actual mistakes. This isn't a mistake. It's more like just not good form, if that makes sense. It's not wrong. It's just like, that's not really how you should write it. Those are like, no, if you do that, you're actually going to be wrong. Yeah. All right. How do you guys feel after doing that example? Feel okay? Should we do another one like that? Yeah? Okay. Let's try. Do you guys want to try another one that has a negative in the front? Negative in the front?
So why did we do that?
Oh, the color, because it just triggers your memory. You'll picture it. Yeah, that's what I do the color for. Negative 5x squared minus 30x plus 165 equals 4. Okay, get the first couple steps done, and then we'll compare. If you divide it by a negative, you divide out a negative, it's going to make it positive. All right, did you guys get the same thing? Yes, yes, yes. Yes, okay. We got a plus with our 6, not a minus, we got a plus. Okay, go ahead and do the next step. Gonna divide by 2 and square it, figure out what goes on the blank, figure out what should be added to the other side.
When you do that next step, which number do you use on the fraction? 6 over 2, which number do you put?
The middle term, so the 6x, that's the number you're going to divide by 2. So you're going to take 6, divide it by 2, and then square it.
And then when you square root the number after that, then you put that in the answer.
So, yeah, 6 divided by 2, and then, so that's 3. 3 squared is 9. 9 goes in the blank. Are we going to be adding 9 to the right side of the equation?
No.
No. Perfect. Okay, good. That was a trick question.
Did we add the negative 45 or subtract?
Does that make sense? Because you've got a negative 5 times the 9.
Yeah, I get that, but I didn't know if you were like supposed to be like writing.
So it's just, you just say whatever you did to one side, you have to do to the other. So if you had a negative 5 times a 9, that's a negative 45 on the left side, which would be a negative 45 on the right side. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I went through the entire problem without doing it. I was wondering, like, you came up to x equals plus or minus for 257.2 minus 15. So, like,
Mm.
that's what it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're writing our equation, and from what I can tell, it looks like this is going to be another one with a decimal under the square root. So if you're getting a decimal under the square root, don't panic. Do we have our equation written down? All right, there's our equation. Yes? 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 Okay. How are we feeling about the process? It's good? It's in our brains? Okay. So I'm going to give you guys a couple problems. This will be like to practice in class / homework. So if you get them done, you can just turn them in. It's okay if I flip to the next page? Yes? Okay. I'll go ahead and write it on here. Yes. Make sure you guys are checking Google Classroom, or not Google Classroom. Make sure you're checking Power Schools. On the completing the square assignments, when I was grading yesterday, a couple people turned theirs in where they had done the quadratic formula to solve instead of completing the square, and then you didn't get credit. And I wrote a note. I gave you a 0 on it and said, used quadratic formula, like redo the problems and submit them again to get credit. Okay, so that happened. I think that it was like 3 or 4 people did that. So make sure that you're actually doing the completing the square method. Because yeah, you can get on Power School and check. Yeah, so there's a few people. 45. All right.